Stangibelisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1, good vibrations. Here's another little quasi-childhood story for you. Actually, it's my freshman year in college. It would have been the fall of 1972 at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota. Back then, my ambition was to become an astronomer, possibly a radio astronomer, but I wanted to be one of those guys who worked in places like the Palomar Observatory or the Radio Telescope Observatory atop Mauna Kea on the Big Island of Hawaii. I wanted to be one of those really highfalutin types. But I took only one quarter. They had quarters rather than semesters at Carleton. Fall, winter, and spring quarter, and then I guess you could take summer classes to make it 4. But in the fall quarter of 1972, I had a ham radio transceiver, probably the National 200 back then, and a transmatch, and I ran a wire out the window to a tree, maybe about 50 or 75 feet long, random wire, and got on the air on bands like 20, 15, 40 meters. They didn't have any 30, 17 or 12 meter bands back then. But I got on the air and I spent more time on the radio, I think, than I did studying. I took 2 classes, I believe. They were pretty demanding. One of them was an introductory class in Russian language, and another one was a mathematics class, calculus, with a professor named Dyer Bennett. I don't remember my Russian teacher's instructor's name or professor. But I ran that wire out there, and no sooner had I begun operating than I started making enemies in that dormitory, Davis Hall, in Northfield, Minnesota. I started making enemies because my radio was coming in on their hi-fi stereo sets, and just about every one of them had a pretty sophisticated hi-fi system, and they all liked to play them at the same time, so Davis Hall sounded like a combination of every possible 1972 song that existed in the universe, all played at once, and then all of a sudden you'd get something like da 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 da. My call sign W0 Ocean Kilo Victor, CW of course. There was enough AC hum modulation on the CW signal so that it caused that modulation to appear somehow or another in these people's stereo hi-fi systems. They weren't listening to the FM radio band. They were playing, I guess, probably old-fashioned vinyl records, 33 1/3 RPM. But somehow they got into the audio circuitry of those stereos, most of them. And I made quite a lot of enemies very quickly that way. So I switched over to an open wire-fed random dipole strung between 2 trees a good 100 feet away from the building, maybe only 10 or 12 feet off the ground. And this open wire ladder line, 450 ohm open wire line running out there. And the administration of the college never said anything to me about doing all this to their campus. Their beautiful campus was now graced by a random wire dipole fed with open transmission line, and that got the antenna radiating element far enough away from Davis Hall so that the stereo problem was resolved. I no longer interfered with these people's stereo sets. I ran about 70 or 80 watts output power. So I got rid of all those enemies. And one day my Russian professor came along the sidewalk, and I happened to be out there looking at this antenna, and I talked to him about it, and he seemed fascinated by this whole ham radio business. Never once said, you know, that thing is ugly and you really shouldn't be having it on this campus. Oh no, he was congenial and thought it was really cool. People used to play catch with a football and hit that open wire line deliberately with the football to see if they could knock it down just for fun. You know, more naughty boys destroying electronic equipment, except my antenna was strong enough to be indestructible. So it just went twang, twang, and they couldn't knock it down, and they didn't seem to care. But I just remember that as an interesting experience. I did more ham radio operating than studying, yet I got A's in both of my classes. I guess that was before the time that coursework in college started to get difficult. It was junior year at the University of Minnesota that I started to have difficulty because the courses were no longer so easy that I could get away without studying at all. I had to study instead of operate their club radio station at the University of Minnesota, W0YC, Yankee Charlie, in the basement of the dormitory Pioneer Hall. We had a tri-bander atop the roof of that dormitory, and yes, we got complaints from the students in that dormitory too. Complaints of interference to their stereo systems. Ah, well, ham radio operation is always a challenge in one way or another. Note the new mood hat. Well, it's not new. It's just the mood hat that I use when I feel like using this mood hat. Anyway, what are your experiences with causing interference to other people's electronic equipment in particular, home appliances, and God forbid things like pacemakers or medical equipment? Tell me about it. Tell us all about it. And be safe. Enjoy ham radio before the enjoyment runs out for some obscure reason, like a bad mood hat. Stan Gibilisco signing off, saying 73, and so long, which, even in Davis Hall, even on these stereo systems, always came out as da-da-da-da-da-da.